Hello. Today I will tell you about a famous bank robbery that took place in France in 1976. This is considered the most valuable bank robbery ever committed in France in the 20th century. It was the Société Générale bank heist with a total value of up to 50 million francs, about 8.5 million USD. There was a man named Albert Spaggiari, commonly known as Bert. He was born in 1932 in Lorraine-Montéglin, southeast France. His parents were Italian immigrants. His father died when he was only 3 years old, and he then moved to live in the seaside town of Hyères with his mother. There, his mother opened a lingerie shop and soon decided to remarry. Bert grew up under the care of his mother and stepfather. As a teenager, he developed a habit of stealing when he saw something he liked. Couldn't help but take it back, and sometimes he even gave stolen goods as gifts to the girl he loved. Due to his dislike of his stepfather, Bert left home to join the military at 17. He served in the paratroopers and was sent to Vietnam, where he was injured twice. In 1953, the age of 21, Bert entered a dairy shop in Hanoi to steal and was subsequently caught. He was returned to France, imprisoned, and then sent to Africa, where he joined a group called audacious. This was a short-lived right-wing paramilitary group in France during the Algerian War, and he was imprisoned again, participating in this organization. After being released from prison, Bert yearned for a new life. In 1968, at the age of 36, Bert and his wife moved to Nice, a Mediterranean seaside city in southeast France. Nice is an important economic town in the south of France. When Bert and his wife arrived in Nice, they bought an old country house on a hill and renovated it. There, he started a poultry farm, while his wife worked as a nurse at a hospital in Nice. They enjoyed a peaceful life there for many years. By 1976, at the age of 44, Bert had opened a photography studio in Nice. Bert was a well-dressed man who loved fashion. With his talent and charm, he attracted many wealthy clients. After a few years, the photography studio was doing very well and provided him with a middle-class life. However, he was still dissatisfied with his current situation. He yearned for more money. One day, Bert went to a bar in Nice and happened to overhear two patrons talking about bank vaults. This immediately caught Bert's attention. Carefully listened to their entire conversation. Turned out that there were thousands of safes stored in the basement of the Société Générale bank in the Nice branch. Many wealthy individuals would rent safes there, where they kept their most valuable items in Europe. Hearing this, Bert's eyes lit up. That night, after returning home, didn't sleep. He thought that if he could get some of the good contents from the safes, he would become the richest person in France. That was his dream goal, but he developed a plan in his mind. The best way to understand what the underground vault of the bank looked like was to see it for himself. Therefore, Bert visited the bank and approached the bank manager. He rented a safe under a false identity. As a result, the manager took him to the basement of the bank for a tour. He saw that the vault had a large circular door with a complex electronic lock. The door and walls were very thick, making the bank very confident. They believed that the vault was impregnable and that no one could enter unless they knew the lock combination. Once inside, what lay before him were countless safes arranged closely together. Each safe had a number, with the highest number being over 4,000, meaning there were more than 4,000 safes in the vault. Bert discovered that while the vault was well secured from the outside, there seemed to be little security inside. Bert thought that he couldn't try to enter through the main door. He would never know the combination, unlock the vault door. If he could get into the vault without going through the door, he could take the treasures without being detected. So how could this be achieved? Bert recalled a novel he had read titled Loophole, How to Rob a Bank. published in 1972. The book detailed how to rob a bank with the city's sewer system. After leaving the bank, Bert walked around the dusty street nearby several times. After walking a few hundred meters, he noticed several manhole covers on the ground. This meant that there were many underground pipes near the bank. Bert thought that perhaps he could actually enter the bank's vault through the sewer system as described in the novel. To confirm this, Bert enlisted a friend who was a construction contractor and went to the town hall. There, he managed to obtain the sewer map of the area around the bank. During this time, no one questioned his strange behavior, as these maps were public and could be obtained as long as you explained your reason. Next, at midnight, when no one was around, he went to open a manhole cover on the street and descended to investigate. Bert spent a week exploring the nearby sewers, and he indeed found a sewer very close to the bank's vault. 200 meters south of the bank is the famous Messina Square in Nice. Bert found a manhole cover on the square. After descending, one would enter the underground sewer system. Continuing north along one of the sewers would lead to a location very close to the bank's vault. After calculations, Bert found that the depth of the bank's vault was equivalent to the position of the sewer, and that the area was only 32 feet away from the wall inside the vault. This made the idea of digging a tunnel into the vault very feasible. However, there could be other issues during the actual implementation, such as breaking through the walls of the vault, which would create loud noises, thus risking detection. Verify the feasibility of this method. Bert set an alarm clock in his rented safe and set it to go off at midnight. He then stood near the bank to see if the alarm would trigger the bank's security and if the police would be called. What he did not expect was that after midnight, nothing happened. The reason was that the walls of the vault were very thick, and the soundproofing was so good that no noise could be heard. This made Bert realize that the vault, which was reputed to be the safest in Nice, was not impregnable. He had found a loophole, and his plan was becoming increasingly feasible. However, he knew that he couldn't carry out the plan alone, so he began searching for collaborators. Bert recruited 20 like-minded individuals from the OAS organization he had previously been involved with, each with their own specialty. Some were skilled in digging tunnels, some in cutting and shaping, some in assessing jewelry, and others in cooking, etc. Bert gathered them together and secretly planned for several months. Each team member was assigned a specific task. Then, in April 1976, they set their plan into action. The team had clearly defined roles. Some were responsible for guarding outside, while others handled logistics. The remaining members, led by Bert, opened a manhole cover in the square and entered the sewer system at night when no one was around. The sewers in Nice revealed not only dirty and smelly intersections, but also a maze of tunnels where one would certainly get lost on the first try. But Bert had figured out the correct route early on. They quickly reached a point very close to the bank's vault. Before starting the actual excavation, they needed to address the issue of electricity, so they ran a long cable to the excavation site. The cable was stealthily connected to the city's power supply, along with lighting and some compact equipment that did not make much noise. They then drilled a hole through the sewer wall and continuously dug towards the bank's vault. To prevent the tunnel from collapsing, they reinforced each section with reinforced concrete. Bert was very strict with the team. He instructed everyone not to drink alcohol or coffee and to get a full 10 hours of sleep before starting work. Only in this way could the effectiveness of the work be ensured. Thus, they continued to dig for 2 months and finally reached the wall. The tunnel was 26 feet long, 31 inches wide, and 51 inches high, just enough for a person to crawl through. Everything went according to plan. Over the past 2 months, no one had suspected their frequent entries and exits from the sewer. The next step was to wait for the right opportunity to act. Bert knew that from Monday to Friday were the bank's working day. Each day during this period, customers would enter and exit the safes, and the vault door would frequently open and close. On Saturdays and Sundays, the bank was closed, and the vault was not open to the public. Only security personnel were present in the bank. The weekend was the most logical time to act. Bert discovered that the 14th of July was approaching, which is Bastille Day. Therefore, customers who needed to use the safes would usually come to settle their affairs before that day. After that, the number of customers would be fewer. Few days after Bastille Day was the weekend, making that period the time when bank security would be the most lax. Therefore, Bert decided to carry out the final action during the weekend following Bastille Day. So did Bert's team succeed in breaking into and escaping from the vault safely? What awaited them inside? Next, let's turn back to the 16th of July, 1976. On July 16, 1976, it was a Friday. Bert and his team of 20 were ready to enter the vault. They began their operation a few hours after the bank closed. They entered the tunnel and drilled a hole about 23 inches in diameter in the inner vault wall. One by one, the team members entered the vault. Before them were over 4,000 safes. After entering, they immediately proceeded to weld shut the vault door, so that even if they were detected, anyone outside would not be able to enter quickly, and the group would have enough time to safely escape. There were also team members outside the bank ready to assist. It seemed risky. They had prepared an escape route. The team celebrated inside the vault. Those outside could not hear anything. After some frantic activity, they began their work. Although they had gained entry, the doors of each safe were very thick. It took some time to open one safe, and they only had the remaining weekend to open the safes. During those days, they systematically broke into safes containing gold, silver, diamonds, jewelry, cash, and other valuables. They even brought a portable stove and food to cook on site. Due to the limited manpower, they could only open more than 300 safes out of over 4,000 and successfully escaped. By Monday morning, July 19th, bank employee arrived for work as usual. According to protocol, he would go into the vault to retrieve some cash and transfer it to the safe on the ground floor. However, today was a bit different. The employee was certain he had entered the correct code. The vault door could not be opened. Seeing that the vault door could not open and with work time approaching, the employee reported to his superior. The bank quickly contacted the manufacturer of the vault door, and a locksmith arrived promptly. After much struggle, the door still could not be opened. By noon, the bank's senior management decided to forcibly open the door to avoid disrupting customer business. Therefore, the repair team took their tools and began to break open the door. After several hours, they finally managed to get inside, and the sight before them was unforgettable. Hundreds of safes were scattered on the ground, their contents taken, and the vault had been robbed. They immediately called the police. Soon after, police arrived at the scene. On one of the walls in the vault, there were several lines written: "No weapons, no hatred, no violence." This message was written by Bert. As he left, he was clearly taunting the police and flaunting his completed masterpiece. They also found a portable stove, empty food wrappers, and dirty dishes, indicating that the thieves had cooked and worked continuously on site. In the corner of the vault, there was a hole about 23 inches in diameter. Behind the hole was a tunnel with a slightly larger space. The total length of the tunnel was 8 meters, and they found various tools such as electric drills, gas cylinders, and other excavation equipment. The tunnel led to the sewer system, in which they could exit through a manhole cover 656 feet away. Soon after, case made headlines across Europe. Valuables worth approximately 50 million francs, about 8.5 million USD, had been stolen from a vault that was reputed to be the safest in France. On hearing the news, clients who used the bank's vault services across Europe were shocked. They were extremely worried and gathered outside the bank's vault, anxiously awaiting news. Each hoped that the safes the thieves had broken into did not belong to them. Since the thieves had worn gloves during the crime, no fingerprints were left at the scene, and at that time, there was no DNA technology. It was very difficult for the police to identify the perpetrator. 3 months passed, and the investigation showed no progress. It seemed that Bert's plan was perfect, but the police discovered a new clue. Leftover tool at the scene, which was a chisel. An officer recalled that they had previously stopped a man named Daniel for a check. He had a prior conviction. At that time, the police found several chisels for penetrating reinforced concrete in the back of his truck, which looked quite similar to the chisel left at the scene. Suspecting a connection, police immediately went to Daniel's home for a search and found additional tools there. The tools had some dirt on them. After testing, the dirt showed similar components to that found in the vault. Police then arrested Daniel for investigation. On June 25, 1977, a year after the robbery, the police arrested Bert on suspicion of theft. However, he firmly denied the charges and refused to disclose the whereabouts of the stolen asset. What awaited him next was a trial. In prison, Bert met a fellow inmate who admired him greatly upon hearing about his heist. Bert made a deal with him. If he could help him escape, he would receive a large sum of money, and the inmate agreed to help. Since he was convicted of a minor offense, he was allowed visitors. During this time, he asked a friend outside to pick up Bert at the agreed time and place. At that time, Bert had become a famous figure in France. He was escorted to the judge's office weekly, and each appearance attracted a large number of reporters. The judge hoped Bert would voluntarily confess to the crime. With witnesses and evidence already in place, an earlier confession could result in a lighter sentence. The judge's office was on the 3rd floor of the courthouse, with windows facing the street. Bert had visited this office many times and was familiar with the surroundings. He planned to escape through the office window. Bert noticed that although the office windows faced the street, the judge sat with his back to the windows. To open the window and escape, he would have to pass in front of the judge, and if he attempted to escape forcibly, he would certainly be stopped. Bert devised a plan. That day, the judge called him into the office for a conversation. Unlike before, Bert was very cooperative with the judge. The window was filled with the sound of a motorcycle engine roaring. This was the signal they had agreed upon beforehand, meaning I am in position and ready. After receiving the code, Bert took a hand-drawn map from his pocket and handed it to the judge. The map had some drawings and lines resembling a building and sewer system. The judge thought it might be a reference map that Bert had used during the crime and carefully examined the map. However, there were no explanations on the drawing. The judge spent a long time trying to understand the content of the drawing, but could not make sense of it. All of this was a deliberate trick by Bert. He intentionally made the drawing confusing to get closer to the judge, under the pretense of explaining it. But his real goal was to approach the window behind the judge. Suddenly, Bert quickly opened the window. While the judge was still examining the map, before he could react, Bert jumped out of the window. He used a car parked below as a cushion and jumped to the ground. He then got on a pre-arranged motorcycle and escaped. The judge was unable to react in time and could only watch as Bert fled. Bert's jump left a dent on the roof of the parked car. A few days later, the owner of the car received a check for 50,000 francs, about 8,000 USD, Bert. This was compensation for the damage Bert had caused to his car. The man responsible for the biggest robbery in France in the 20th century. Although the suspect Bert had fled, court proceeded with the trial as planned, and Bert was sentenced to life imprisonment. Bert's story became legendary. Such a plot really happened in reality. Rumors suggest that Bert underwent cosmetic surgery after escaping. He then fled to Argentina and lived under an alias. Police went through a series of chases but never managed to catch him. By June 1989, 13 years after the incident, there was finally news about Bert. He had died of throat cancer in Argentina at the age of 56. According to Bert's wishes, his body was repatriated to France for burial. Besides Bert, those involved in the case had also escaped, each in their own direction. It wasn't until 2010 that the police found all of them. However, by then, the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution in France expired, and they could not be prosecuted. The vast amount of stolen property has still not been recovered, and where the money is and how it was divided is probably known only to them. The case of Albert Spaggiari is not just one of the most daring bank heists in history, but also a story full of surprising twists and turns. From meticulously planning the crime to his dramatic escape and life on the run, Albert Spaggiari left an indelible mark on the history of. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on more fascinating stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.